everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the El Emergente series. My name is Julius Christos Mangos de Oliveira, and together with Mariana Marcano, are part of the Australian LATAM Emerging Leaders Dialogue. Our organization seeks to strengthen Australian and Latin American relations through the next generation of young leaders.
Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Keyma Vazquez, and my heart fills with pride. She is the MasterChef Australia Season 14 fourth place winner. She was the first Venezuelan to participate in MasterChef Australia and the first Latina to make it to the top four. Wow. A mother of two, an engineer by trade, cook by heart, originally from my lovely Venezuela, living in Australia, Keyma, is influenced by the flavors of her land and her immigration journey.
And so impressive and innovative was Kama that Judge Melissa Leong said that she was definitely one to watch on the cooking show this year, offering cultural knowledge and techniques that contenders haven't necessarily brought to the table before. There has always been a wonderful diversity of characters on the show, with stories and culture, and that continues. And Judge Melissa said that what she loved this season was learning about the Caribbean and Venezuelan food culture that was brought by Kama.
So, Keyma, growing up in Venezuela, how and when that passion for cooking began?
Thank you, Mariana, Julius, for having me today here. I mean, it's such a pleasure to talk to you guys. When I heard about the organization, I was so excited because I didn't really know that it existed. But it's good to talk about this stuff in terms of Latin influences here in Australia. So I always say that I was a cook before anything else. I was like 10 years old when I started just getting into the kitchen. And my mom, she had the biggest cookbook like collection. And many of them there were bakery, pastry books. And I will just sit down in the living room reading them instead of reading any, stories and novels. I would read cookbooks. And then I started just asking for ingredients, and my mom started just buying them and bringing them into the kitchen. And she will just only supervise now and then, but I will get and just cook cookies, biscuits, and cakes. I started just baking a ton all the time. And then all of a sudden, when I was like 14 or something, I became like the designated baker of the family. So every time there was a party, I had to take in a cake or a bread or something. Like it was always Kema has to bring the cakes. So I think since the beginning, I was really excited about cooking, and my family gave me a lot of free, choice into cooking, and that helped a lot. I mean, they encouraged me to get into it. My family from mother's side as well, they are pretty much all foodies. So we will sit down in the table and we will talk about what everyone cooked the day before. Even my uncles, they will talk, oh yes, I made a pork belly. And I mean, it was for me as a child to hear all of that while we were eating. I mean, it was just being influenced by all, the daily talk, I guess. My grandma used to cook amazing dishes as well. Every time we will kind of reunite as a family, there was food involved, like family reunions. There was big parties. My mom, my aunties, and I will used to cook like a huge catering for any birthday party. Like it was pretty much in my veins, I guess. So it wasn't a strange thing to me to actually apply for MasterChef.
That's wonderful, and
Yeah.
I mean you can tell also immediately that the talent was already there too, because there aren't many 10-year-olds that are allowed into the kitchen and given that kind of liberty.
No.
So fantastic. I know my family wouldn't have trusted me in the kitchen.
I
Maybe
don't
you
trust my kids. I don't know how much I'm a mom did. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you already um kind of went into it. But so with all this and your journey up to this, what inspired you to take your cooking talents and your experience into participating into MasterChef? And how would you describe how your whole experience was from start to finish?
I guess one of the things is it was migrating here to Australia. So I always loved cooking. And then when I came here and discovered the show, like it was 11 years ago, and then I just discovered, well, there's a show for, cooking, actually, competing in cooking that was really near to me. And I immediately got hooked in terms of the show. I mean, it was my favorite show for, you know, basically that's the only thing I watch on TV. And that's how much of a fan I am. And then I guess through the years, I started just getting more into it. And then my cooking started growing as well because I was influenced by the show. So what is that happening? And obviously being in Australia, in Melbourne, all of the cooking influences, all of the food around the multicultural influence, it started to shape my style of cooking a little bit as well. So I started to grow as a cook. And then I started to feel that I actually could compete. And then my kids, they became part of the fan group. They started watching the show with me as well. And I think it was like probably a few years ago when they started just encouraging me to apply. They were like, "Mom, you're such a good cook. You're the best. You should go and apply for the show." And I think if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have made it. I mean, for me, it was more that little push I needed to actually, give me the courage to go and apply. I think when you cook for your family, you don't have any other point of reference of whether you can cook as a professional, in a professional level or not. For me, it was a lot of experimenting at home. And it was all feeding them and just, creating new dishes and trying to do, a little bit more creative things. But yeah, so after I applied, I guess I wasn't really expecting to get through. I wasn't, for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to make it, but I don't know. It was pretty much like a long, yeah. I thought it was like a leap of faith, kind of like for me, I wasn't sure about it. But then I got called to the auditions, and just to be in the auditions was incredible. I mean, for me, it was like, this is a pinch me moment. And from there on, it was a pinch me moment every week. I mean, every week I stayed on the show. I was like, I just can't believe it. But for me, it was so unbelievable, amazing, because it was my favorite show. I was such a fan of the show. And then being there, standing next, in front of the judges, in front of all of these favorites that I watched them on TV before. And then because I didn't believe my style of cooking, which is not very, very common in MasterChef as well. I wasn't sure that what will be the actual, how will they receive it. So I was very, very much the first few weeks, I was really feeling like a fish out of the water, like I wasn't very sure of what was going on. And I think after a lot of feedback, mostly positive feedback, I started feeling that, oh, I belong here. This is, and then obviously getting used to the surroundings, because it's very different to cook at your place than cooking in a kitchen that everything moves, everything's so far away, the equipment is really different, the pantry it's packed and it's overwhelming because you stand there and there's so many ingredients that you don't even know that it's really overwhelming. So you have to kind of cope with the whole environment and think in a recipe in an hour. Like it's so full on. So I think the experience at the beginning was very overwhelming and very full on. And then you start kind of, getting used to it, understanding how the games goes. I mean, you understand the actual game, what they asking you, and how do you actually come up with a solution for what they ask you. And obviously there's the factor of, well, I stayed for another week. So I have to figure it out to continue going. And then obviously at the end of the show, when you're already very much into it, everything changes all the time. Like it's more strange ingredients. There's always a different, like variable into the show, and you have to constantly evolve. I guess you have to constantly study. I have to study a lot to be able to cope with participating this year, this time around with the favorites, which they all had past experience, both in the show and in the industry. And then to me, as a home cook, to come here, I had to, with my techniques, I had to evolve and bring on more techniques, understand ingredients I didn't actually haven't seen in my life. Like I had to actually go through a huge process of, I guess, accelerated growth. So as a person as well, I think it was an amazing experience to be able to build a resilient self. And I'm really grateful for it, but at the same time, it was high pressure all the time. So I think it's an amazing experience for one to test themselves as a cook, but also as a person, because it develops a lot of the self, I guess. So, and yeah, up to the end, obviously happy that I made it so far. I didn't win, but I won so much more. All the friends, I mean, the judges' feedback, that was what it actually helped me grow week in week, time and time again. And then now that when I come back and cook to my family, it's like, it's so different because you have such an understanding of, the food business, the food world, I guess. And it's different. I see everything different.
So it's just fantastic. Keyma, I can tell you, I'm trying to grab all the different things you're mentioning. I think that visualization was so powerful, telling us that 10 years ago you started watching the program, and 10 years after you made it and you reached the 4th place is not a small thing. And the support from your family, how important is that? And in our culture, I guess that's huge too. And something that I want to highlight is I belong. I love that you felt that you belonged there in the competition and you had your place. So we can talk about that a bit later. Let's talk about the cooking and the dishes and the ingredients. So cooking Venezuelan and Caribbean dishes with all of the diversity we have in Australia, because we know that we live in a very multicultural country, and you have a variety of ingredients, not just Australian, from other countries. How has that influenced your cooking, especially cooking Venezuelan dishes in the MasterChef kitchen?
Oh, hugely, because when you come here, you don't really necessarily have all the ingredients our cuisine needs. I mean, Venezuelan and Caribbean, they're pretty specific ingredients, and it's tropical. It's very much tropical, and then in Australia we have seasons. It has to be imported, and not all of them they reach Australia. So for me to cook any of the dishes, anything you saw during the show, it was an interpretation of our cuisine. It wasn't because I had to do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to present anything. Because that's the other thing, the pantry is not set for me. It's set for a number of people that have a diverse background. So you have a pantry with Mexican ingredients, some of them, not all of them, and then you have a pantry for Asian ingredients, and they just try to source as much as possible to create a diverse pantry, but it's not always, for example, plantains that are huge in all Latin and Caribbean cuisine. I couldn't have them only twice in the whole show, in 61 episodes. I saw them twice in the pantry. So that's it. I was subject to availability of the ingredients. So I had to pivot a lot if I wanted to bring anything, not authentic, but anything similar to Caribbean and Latin. So what I chose to do was utilize the techniques, like Aboriginal techniques, Venezuelan techniques, Caribbean techniques, and include some of the ingredients I could find in the pantry. So that's why you see a lot of fusion, a lot of cross-cultural in my dishes, because that's the way I guess any culture that comes here has to cook. Because we even Sri Lankan and in India, Obviously nowadays are more widespread, but at the beginning, I suppose they have to adapt and they have to evolve their cooking to be able to get something similar to whatever they had in their place at their place. So it's really interesting because I was really nervous at the beginning to do that because I was like, oh, I'm messing up with Venezuelan cuisine, no, because we're not migrants. And then I think when you migrate, you think about your traditions, and it's hard to believe that it can be some sort of fusion and some sort of changes into it. And because we don't have that huge migration culture, I believe the cuisine hasn't evolved as much as well. So it's just recent that our cuisine is actually being heard around the world. So I think when something like this happened, which happened, I feel it is quite interesting because I feel that I could just bring light into that area of the Caribbean and Venezuela, and into saying, well, this cuisine has so much more to give if you are able to introduce other ingredients and introduce other techniques. Because, for example, I understood quickly, being in the show, that you need to learn the basics of cuisine, which is basically French cooking. So when I started studying French cuisine, I could see similarities in some of the dishes we made in Venezuela, and how could I actually do it more technical while introducing French techniques. So when you do that, that's when you see the evolution of the cuisine, because it gets refined and it gets, you're just sourcing flavor and sourcing the core of the cuisine, but making it in a more elevated way. So I think it was pretty interesting in that sense, because for me it was it's my passion. So for me, I was having so much fun. I was having so much fun doing that, because it's part of the learning curve, like understanding that this is your cuisine, that this is where you can take it. Like it was like a huge learning curve, and it was still, and it was doing wonders in terms, for me, in terms of what it was Venezuelan, Latin, and Caribbean cuisine. When I saw the end result, I was like, wow, I was always amazed at the way you can add other ingredients and other techniques and create something even better, beautiful, or different. So I think in that sense, I hope everyone got proud of what I did.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
I mean, as a Venezuelan, I got so nervous at the beginning because I don't want to offend anyone and I didn't want to appropriate with any culture in particular, but I wanted to showcase Latin America in a way that people haven't seen before. Because here in Australia, I feel there's a misconception of what is Latin cuisine actually. And then I thought, well, why not? If I'm given this opportunity to actually be the voice of many people here in Australia, why not? Am I able to do Venezuelan and then showcase some dishes from the Caribbean, and I did some from Peru? And if I had more time, I would have done some from Brazil. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to showcase that Latin American cuisine is so diverse and so different.
Yeah, something I can tell you is that as a Venezuelan, seeing our traditional dishes, the ajaca, the piscandina, made in this new modern form, and looking at the judges and loving it, it was just I just wanted to be there to taste it, because they look good. I guess they tasted great.
Yes, they're good.
And I was just like, I'm so proud, and I feel that we all, the community, is so proud, because it's another level, not losing our tradition. We're keeping that tradition, we're keeping that that passion for our own dishes, but adapting and reinventing yourself. So that's something that I really admire that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and taking all of that, I think also one thing that I see, and I think it's very evident in the way you speak, it's something you've just absorbed all of your experiences, and you've been able to, um, not just in a cooking sense, but quite literally in a way of life. You've been able to incorporate it and learn a lot from it. And I think that's there's so much to be admired about that. And it's a lesson for everyone, no matter where you're from. And with that specifically and going beyond cooking, just wanted to know, in your opinion, what is the greatest lesson that people can learn from Australia and the Australian culture? And likewise, if there's one thing, I know there's so many, but if there's one thing from Venezuela and the Venezuelan culture that the world should know or learn from, what do you think that is as well?
Yeah, I think from Australia, I think not only MasterChef. I guess since you get here as a migrant, you start learning from this culture, and I feel that one of the things that comes to my attention is the laid back culture, like being relaxed about so many things that we as Latins, we just get so concerned about certain social things and certain, the way we look and the way, and then I feel Australians are much more relaxed in that way. They just themselves, I guess. So I think learning from that, like acceptance of self and just incorporating that into our culture would be amazing. I feel that especially having kids, I've been able to give them the freedom to be themselves and not be so, I guess, strict in terms of the rules we're supposed to have, and we're supposed to, be so concerned in terms of how the way you should behave, or the way you should dress. And I feel that is a huge take. I'm always be admired from the culture here. And I guess that will be one. At the moment I don't have another. Well, I guess everything works as well in here. Not in a sense that I think the systems, they're pretty much, they have these conveyance in terms of everything has to be done at the time, especially being in the show where everything was time scheduled, and they're really into getting things done in the time it has to be. So I think that's a great way to put it, like everything is in order. But I guess from our culture, Venezuelan culture, and overall Latin cultures, I think, again, from my experience, I feel that being the joyful personalities we are, I mean, we take the party, and everywhere we go, I feel that everyone felt I was oversharing all the time because I was dancing all the time on and off set. I was constantly hugging everyone, so being effective and showing your emotions a lot more. I think that's something that Latin cultures are very in tune with their feelings, and which is great in a way, because we are able to, I guess there's less depression and less, mental health issues, because we train through our emotions so much. And that will be something I will suggest to people, to understand how to actually be able to verbalize what we feel, be able to show what we feel in all the scales, and then go through those emotions without holding so much and getting sick. So I feel because I was like that, I was too much for some people. But at the end, that was the only way I could go through, for example, that level of stress and pressure in that particular situation. And I think the only way I could do it was just laughing at things and dancing and letting it out. So I think as Latin, I think that's something that I really appreciate, just being taught that I need to be able to express freely. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I think that's what makes you genuine and authentic. And you became famous for your chimney, right? So what I loved is that the judges embraced that, and that is a fantastic picture of the diversity and inclusion at the same time. So embracing different cultures. So yeah, no, I agree with you. You spoke about your kids, and the next question we want to ask you is that what are the lessons that you want your kids to take from your life journey, from the Caribbean roots to growing up in Venezuela and now living in Australia?
I guess like it'll be part of the same of what I was speaking before with the Latin, culture. I feel I want them to be themselves, but still be able to go through their emotions and their life situations in the best way without holding too much. I feel that in our case, Mike is pretty much open to tell us a lot. Like we have an open talk all the time, and then that way everything's transparent and they're happier, I guess, in that way. But also, I guess they have to be proud of what they are, and I think they are anyway. Like that's why I feel they love. My son was born here, but he loved arepas and empanadas more than anyone I know, and he's an Aussie. But I think it's a matter of what you teach them since the beginning. That there's many families here in Australia that just live in diversity. They came here and they just raise their family in between two cultures. But that doesn't mean that you're something strange. It's just more richer because you're getting all the best of Australia, and they're the best example of what we were talking before. So they're just learning from this culture at school and in their environment, but they're also learning from being warm, family centered, and that love that we're such a family people in our culture, and they're learning that from home. So I think that's the beauty of it. So to embrace both worlds and to become a richer person, I guess. I believe that that's one of the beauties of having so much multiculturality here in Australia, because you can see those personalities around, and they just enrich themselves by both cultures, by diverse cultures. And I guess from the show, what happened, if I can respond to that one, it'll be like, for me, I wanted to teach them that you can do whatever you want. I mean, in terms of as a person, you can't settle for just I guess not reaching out for your goals and your dreams. My daughter especially, she got so inspired from me going to the show. Every time I came in, she will tell me how proud she was of me, just because she felt I sacrificed so much as a mom and all that. But now it was just giving me myself the space to actually go for something I love. And she, for me, that she actually acknowledged that she felt inspired. It was huge, because at such a young age, to see that example is huge. That you can actually go after your goals, after your dreams.
Uh, that's absolutely beautiful. And you know, through we already mentioned how genuine you are, and you see that in the lessons and everything you embody, and that's something that your kids will definitely take for the rest of their lives. And it'll it'll just be like cooking an emotion the emotional perfect dish of mixing all these influences, and the finished dish will be your kids. In such a beautiful and rich way, with all this richness from all these different places, which is wonderful. And now turning a little bit back to solely into you. Um, with all of this, you've learned so much, and this might be hard because there's so many opportunities now. But what do you see yourself doing from now on? Do you have any career aspirations that you're putting into plan now? Is there what's your next goal? What's the next step for you?
Well, after doing such a thing like MasterChef and getting so far, I guess to me it was a validation of myself. And as I told you, when I got into the show, I wasn't really aware of how good of a cook I was, other than my family saying, "Yes, mom, it's delicious." But then having the validation from the judges and all the people that came through the show and gave me good feedback about my flavors, what I do, and seeing that I can learn so much in such a short amount of time as well, and evolve that, cooking. Obviously, I want to take this further, and as well the influence I got to do during the show, because I've received so many messages from people that got inspired, not only in the life, inspiration, but of learning more about our cultures as well. So I think I opened in a way the dialogue with this audience as well, and I have their attention at the moment in order to talk about Caribbean Latin food, which I think we know so little here in Australia. So one of the things will be continue that education path, and I'm trying to do that throughout my social media. So all of the dishes, not all of them are going to be Latin Caribbean, but the ones that are, I'm trying to give some sort of lessons around location, ingredients, techniques, so people can get to know the difference and the diversity in our food. But I also want to collaborate with restaurants that are in the city, hopefully around the country, to be able as well to draw people into them, to them to get to know it. So the collaborations will be me just doing a dish and then, participating with them in terms of, creating some menus. In conversation with a restaurant here in Melbourne as well, early stages, to try to come up with a menu as well. And ultimately, I want to create my own menus to deliver in not a restaurant. I'm not sure if that's what I want just yet, but maybe some intimate experience every now and then, so people can get to know the food in a more educational way. So I want them to just taste a little bit of the Caribbean in different parts and rotate that menu so people can get to know more. For me, it's always been a passion for showcasing the flavors and understanding where do we come from, especially because it's such a little community. I want people to actually get to know the food. I don't know if Australians, they will go to Latin America at some point because it's so far away. So I think it's just getting that gap a bit like smaller, so they can just get to have a little bit of Latin America here and get to know the culture a bit more. And probably a book. I don't know, so many ideas, but I think, yeah, I have many things in on the go, and I'll slowly be announcing each one of them. But for now, I think the collaborations are the like shorter term projects.
Wow, that sounds really exciting, and I encourage everyone watching this interview to go and follow Keyma. Keyma, we might probably put your details here. So to finalize this amazing conversation, our community is, as you said, we're minority, and I'm talking about the Latin community in general. What would be a word of advice that you will tell a Latin person that is watching this or have watched your journey at MasterChef? What will you tell them to inspire them?
But for me, I think it's been such a crazy journey, and it took me 11 years to get where I am. But it's because we Latins, we get here, and I know it's daunting. It's a daunting experience to migrate, to get used to where, Australia is such a huge adaptation from, language and culture. But at the end, we have so much to give. I mean, for me, just understanding that because we don't feel represented, we're fearful of, going for better opportunities and going for, our dreams. So applying for that job we want or opening that business we want. I think there's a bit of a stigma in terms of what we actually can do in this culture, in this country. And we can do so much. We just have to get past the fear of, trying, the fear of applying, the fear of, speaking in public. I couldn't even imagine for me, speaking in English, which I thought it was really bad. And look at me. I was able to represent, the community, to cook my way through MasterChef. And like a few years ago, I couldn't believe I will make it. So I think it's more about believing in ourselves and believing that even though we're so far away of our culture, so far away of our country, we all have that, skills, those skills, and we are able to give that into a country as Australia. And then I got a huge reception, beautiful reception from Australian people, not just Latin communities. And I think they're ready for it. They're ready to know more about Latins and more about, our ideas, and then ready to embrace our community. So to me, it's just go for it. Just don't stand in the sidelines. And if you have something in mind, just go and try it, because the only way it will become true is you make a choice and act on it. Otherwise, it will never become, a dream, come true.
Absolutely, absolutely. The only way to go through it is just actioning and doing it. And fear is always going to be there, because that's the survival.
It's gonna be there.
Brain, but and that means that you care. But the only way to do it is just
Overcome the fear and then doing it.
Yes.
And nothing is gonna come in a few days. I mean, it takes time to create an empire, to build an empire, and we have to, just take this step and go after our dreams, as little or as big as they are.
Well, you're an amazing ambassador of the Latin culture, the cooking. So I cannot thank you enough, Keyma, for your time today, for sharing your stories, your ideas, your journey from Venezuela to Australia. It has been an absolute pleasure to hear from you and your experience. I'm so proud. I cannot tell you, it's not just interviewing, but seeing you compete is being a great pleasure.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and on my behalf as well, and surely on the behalf of everyone else who's also watching, thank you again, not just for joining us and speaking to us, but for everything you represent, for everything that you do, and for doing it in such a humble way and showing people that, you know, taking this leap is worth it, and just showing the great values that and what you have to gain in terms of just progressing as a human being, no matter where you're from, and going beyond a Latin ambassador, you're a human ambassador, and a great inspiration to us all. So thank you for that, and of course for strengthening the food and cultural opportunities, and just showing what Venezuela, Latin America, and now with the mixture of everything, what Australia as well has to offer as well.
Yeah, completely. Thank you, Julius.
Thank you.
And for everyone watching, thank you for stay tuned for more inspiring discussions with Australian and Latin American leaders in our El Emergente series. Thank you so much, and goodbye.